All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Well, hello all. Yes, it's great to be back. We had a very eventful day yesterday.
Yeah, that was fun.
Connection between our show, you missed it, Albert. The connection between our show and many shows with millions of subscribers never made it on the air yesterday.
What?
Because the connection between the streaming service and YouTube was incomplete, unconnected. There was a technical issue.
Yeah, but you know the difference between us and them? We're radio professionals. That's what happened.
We did kind of improv it, and so we did a show.
Never been anything like this.
Yeah, it was pretty, but Albert, you missed all the fun.
Albert, thank you.
And Albert is here today, back with a very big show. And I'm sorry for my voice. I've lost it a little bit, but I think it's a bit better than it was yesterday. But anyway, Kim is here too.
Kim, how are you?
And there are plenty of people who have full-throated performance ready. One of whom will join us in a minute. He was one of, if not the first reporter to the O.J. Simpson crime scene. And he covered that trial. So I'm going to get a chance to talk to him about the news, about O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson passing away.
At the age of 76?
Sadly, just as he was about to find the real killers, he passes away. It's what can one...
What?
Well, I mean, the good news is he was surrounded, I'm seeing, based on press reports, by family that he still hadn't slaughtered. And so that is a very special moment that they all have and will share forever.
Yeah, they said he was battling cancer. And it happened really quickly because he had announced
that joined his battle against the truth, which he's been pursuing for some time. Mark, are you going to let the murder thing go or what? No, I mean, give the man a break. No. So we killed a couple of people. Sorry. Don't mean to be too hard on him. Go ahead, Kim. He'd been battling cancer for some time, you were saying.
He had been battling cancer. He said he was cured. Then,
Kim, how are you?
You know, a very short time later, it's back and he does not survive it. Yeah.
No. There you go. Well, I will talk to Jim in a moment. We'll follow up, and I even will get a word from Katsadamus, David Katz, about the O.J. Simpson case, only because I'm curious about the legal side. I mean, everybody knows he killed those people. Please, he did everything but leave a Heisman Trophy there. I mean, my God, it was, so obvious. The blood all matched up. I mean, truly. I mean, he could have signed autographs there. It was that clear.
But he was acquitted in a
nothing.
Yeah.
He was acquitted in a court of law. Don't you trust the system, Mark?
Absolutely not. In fact, I will tell you that maybe, and it's got a lot of competition, but that's pretty good, a pretty good poster child for why you shouldn't just trust the system. If you're rich and famous, you can get away with a lot. And the justice system is not the place you go for justice, right? OJ did it, says Vilma. Wow. Well, Vilma has spoken, everyone. So,
good day, sir.
Right. Let me get just to what else is happening on the show, and then I'll get to Jim Avila. You'll let me know when he joins, okay?
Yeah.
I have other law and disorder. I have some Trump news. And talk about taking another bullet for Trump. I mean, these people around Trump are amazing. His ex-finance chief is going to Rikers for another 5 months, taking another bullet for Trump. He's going for perjury. We'll bring up some of that with David Katz. I do want to talk about the Arizona case. I want to talk about their Supreme Court in Arizona. We've spoken of it a lot. It'll get a lot of media oxygen generally. But what I want to get from David Katz, who joins us in the second hour, is a little bit of the legal side. So we will do that as well. And my God, there is so much to talk about when it comes to stuff that's going on in the world of law and stuff that's going on in the world of Trump. He is on a major charm offensive. He is on a major damage control offensive. And what's happening at Mar-a-Lago now is the Speaker of the House, this Mike Johnson, who, as you know, is really an extremist, but has had to moderate a bit now that he is Speaker of the House. He's now having to beat back this Marjorie Taylor Green and her true crazies. And in that effort, he's now trying to enlist the help of Donald Trump. And so he's at Mar-a-Lago kissing the ring.
Do they not see what's happened to all the other people that aligned with Donald Trump? I mean, they're getting disbarred, they're going to jail, and they're still yet going to Mar-a-Lago for a nice curtsy and a little fundraiser.
He
right?
has real power, I guess. Is this from Edward Lee? Big shout out.
Big shout out.
A $2 super chat. He says, killer or non-killer? OJ's in the Hall of Fame. Well, he's in the Killer Hall of Fame, which is great. Yeah, I mean, you know. And that is really hotly contested. By the way, his Heisman Trophy, speaking of the Hall of Fame, it was never taken into custody. It has remained. In fact, there's a rumor that I don't know if I should say this or not. We're kind of all mobbed up in our own ways with the people who covered the O.J. Simpson trial and even those who were close to O.J. Simpson. One of whom told me that the Heisman Trophy was being protected by this other attorney, I'll just put it that way, who was very close to O.J. So,
what, as far as they wouldn't sell it and give money to the family?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So that they couldn't take it. I don't know that they could have anyway, but they were so worried about it that they sort of, they back-channeled it to this guy. I greatly enjoyed the show yesterday, says Peter Newton. I greatly enjoyed the effort you put into yesterday's show. Great job. It was pretty improv. We were kind of expecting that we might have to cancel the show, and then we started talking and thought, oh, well, I guess we can do it. So let me know if Avila and when Avila arrives.
Okay.
You sent him the link, so...
Yeah, I'm going to do it again, though, now.
You have to send it to the new email address that I pushed along to you. Mm-hmm. As we talk about that, I'll just give you a few other things that are going on in the world.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is crazy that this politics of Washington is so hot, so intense, that everything is being cut along party lines. And the reauthorization of this U.S. spy tool is now blocked by the House conservatives. This is a bill that would reauthorize this national security surveillance program, and it was blocked yesterday by a conservative revolt, which really makes it very possible that it won't pass. Now, I'm no national security expert, but apparently this is an important instrument in this world of national security and surveillance. And here's the reason that there's the revolt. Because Donald Trump said that they should kill the measure. The legislative breakdown comes months after a similar process to reform and reauthorize the surveillance program fell apart before it even reached the House floor. Speaker Mike Johnson has called the program critically important, but has struggled to find a path forward on this issue, which has been plagued by partisan bickering.
Mark, Jim is here. Just want to let you know.
Okay, thank you. I'll get to Jim in just 10 more seconds. So the idea is that this new bill would renew the surveillance program, but it would do it with a series of reforms that would satisfy a lot of critics of the program. So there were civil liberties issues associated with this program, and those were addressed. And but Republican critics are complaining that the changes do not go far enough, calling into doubt whether the bill backed by the Biden administration and by Johnson would have enough votes to advance. So again, that's another piece of legislation termed critical by the national security surveillance team in Washington that doesn't make it because of partisan bickering. Look, you may, after the Iraq WMDs, you say that, Mark, are massive intelligence failures, and you say it's important. Oh,
yeah.
Let me just look at that comment again. Let me try put it. Okay, after Iraq's WMDs, you say that, Mark, are massive intelligence failures, and you say it's important. Right. I think I understand that. Do you understand that? Maybe I didn't get that.
I think they're agreeing with you.
Oh, well then, thank you.
I mean, I think it's
the WMD thing was such a red herring. That was it looked like a straw man at the time, the WMD thing, that that we invaded Iraq before there were even UN inspectors allowed to go in and really do the real work of establishing whether or not there were WMDs. And of course, there was a lot of false data and bad intelligence, but that was the intelligence community, I should say, playing ball with the White House. This has to do with FISA warrants. Exactly, John. Trump thinks that they use FISA against him, so that's why the Republicans don't want to pass it. That's right. It has to do with FISA warrants. And to be fair, there should be warrants before you do cull data on American citizens, put it that way. But anyway, that's what's happening. I just want to give you a sense of the back and forth in the House and how, and I'll get back to it, how Johnson is essentially going down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring and kneel before Trump to try to get his help. Otherwise, he stands the very likely possibility of being voted out. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Voted out as Speaker. This guy is a remarkable journalist. He was forged in the intense streets of Chicago as a journalist, where you're ferreting out corruption and there's real journalism being done. He's an award winner. Then he goes, and of course he wins more awards, the Murrows, the Peabodys, the Emmys at the major networks. He covered the White House for years. He was the White House correspondent, and he was a regular on this show for a long time. Now he leads the investigative team at ABC 10 in San Diego. But and the reason I've asked him to be here today, and I'm so delighted that he can be, is if he wasn't the first reporter on the scene, he was one of the first on the O.J. Simpson case. How about it for Jim Avila?
Thanks, Mark.
Hello, sir.
Good to talk to you again.
Yeah. It's great to have you back with us for just a few minutes, even if that's all we manage. I wonder if you can speak to this O.J. Simpson case. You really were with it for every beat of that story.
Right. In 1994, I worked at KNBC from 94 to 96 in Los Angeles. And I was at home in Santa Monica when my phone rang early in the morning and was told to go to Bundy Drive. And that, of course, is where the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and the poor young man, Ron Goldman, who had just come over to drop her glasses off and was involved in the terrible murder. So we were, so I was there from the very beginning, and I covered that story straight for almost the 2 years that I was there at KNBC, and then I was hired away to go to the network after that. So I covered the trial. We carried it live on KNBC like a lot of places did. We carried the trial live for 11 months. No soap operas, nothing like that. It was live on television. And I was there with Paul Moyer and Manny Medrano in the KNBC newsroom and covered it there all the time. So I saw the ins and the outs. I'll just say one thing before you ask other questions. The big lesson for me at the end of it was, look, I thought he was guilty. There's no doubt about it. The DNA showed that he was guilty. The fact that his blood was found, that Ron Goldman's blood, who he had never met, was in O.J. Simpson's truck, was kind of the final answer for me. But what I learned is that the African-American community, because of their experiences with police, feel the police, see police testimony, see police activity totally different than the rest of us do, and for good reason, because they've been lied to, they've been set up many times. And your friend right there, your people right there, that of course is OJ And
That's Kardashian, isn't it? In the middle?
Kardashian, yeah, Kardashian there. And I'm trying to see who that is. I think that's the guy from UC Berkeley. But he had the dream team, of course, which was led by Johnny Cochran. He had F. Lee Bailey, who just destroyed Mark Furman on the stand, who was the cop who was a racist and used the N-word and claimed that he didn't. So he's caught in a perjury right there on court in front of the jury. And remember, the jury was predominantly African American. So they're seeing a whole different trial than the rest of us are seeing.
That's such a great point. And that was a decision made by who was it was Garcetti, wasn't it? Who was the DA who said we want to move
Garcetti was the DA.
Yeah, we want to move this case to from Santa Monica, where it would have been tried. After all, that's where the crime happened in Brentwood. We want to move it downtown. That changed the jury pool. He was worried about it being having the look of racism if it were just tried by a white jury, right?
Yeah, he wanted to. He O.J. Simpson was an icon. Now, what's interesting is that O.J. Simpson became this hero of the African American community, allegedly, when he was the least black person who was black in the entire world. O.J. Simpson didn't hang with the folks in the hood. He lived in Brentwood. He lived in a huge mansion. He hung with cops. He hung with the cops would come to his house, not just because Nicole Simpson was calling crying about being beat up, but he socialized with them. He played golf at the Riviera and other places like that. He was not your stereotypical black man who was beaten on the street. He was no Rodney King. But Johnny Cochran did a masterful job of portraying him in court as someone who the police had set up. And because the African-American jury had seen that happen in their communities, it was not a stretch to them when Johnny Cochran claimed that the detectives planted all that blood, that they brought OJ's blood and they put it in the Bronco, and they put Ron Goldman's blood in the Bronco. And, that to us seems highly unlikely, but to the African-American community who had seen it happen for years and had just come off, remember the Rodney King beating in LA. And remember the LA cops at that time especially had a terrible reputation in the African-American community. So all of that combined to result in a not guilty verdict, in my opinion, and in fact was a huge surprise to me and was an education for me about what had happened in the African-American community. I think I and the rest of the white population, I'm Hispanic, but the white and the Hispanic populations who didn't live in the communities didn't realize that this was what a difference that made.
You really do a nice job of reminding us of the fact that this absurd notion that this mountain of evidence, I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary, the amount of evidence there. I mean, blood evidence, there was even a witness account that sort of coincided with the barking of the dog. And the only reason we knew how damning all this evidence was is because, as you've suggested, it was wall-to-wall coverage, and you're hearing all these legal analysts talk about, oh my God, this is just so damning in every way. You have someone who is hearing this concurrent with the time frame, blah, 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 blah. Somebody actually saw him driving away from the scene. Anyway, and
you had Nicole Brown Simpson's voice on tape. One of the first things they played was Nicole Brown Simpson on tape on a 911 call, crying out to the police, please come to my house. He's going to kill me. Now, this was not on the day of the actual murder, but she clearly was afraid of this man, and he had beaten her. There was pictures, if you remember the pictures of her face, where he had beaten her up and huge black eyes. So domestic violence was a thing that was rampant in that household. So, all of that evidence nullified, I think, first of all, by Mark Furman, you see there in the picture there, the guy in the red tie, who on the stand said he never used the N-word to F. Lee Bailey. And then F. Lee Bailey came back with a transcript and an audio tape where he had told this writer, where Furman had told this writer, yeah, he used it, and he used it all the time, and he used it in that tape. So it was just caught and red-handed in his perjury, and that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah,
and then of course the gloves, Mark. I mean,
yeah, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. I mean,
Yeah.
Normally you'd find that glove would again just be it would be the lock on the case, found on his property with the blood, and they allowed, and this is the series of events and variables that all came together. You have Judge Ito letting them in the moment just improv that. We'll try the glove on, but meantime he's wearing these plastic, some kind of latex gloves over his hand. So the glove, which would probably have shrunk a bit from the blood anyway, really doesn't fit.
It had been tested and had blood on it and could have shrunk. There's all kinds of things, reasons why not to use the gloves. Chris Darden the assistant prosecutor there, made that decision. And I can remember looking at Marcia Clark's face when OJ was trying to force those on. There's the picture of him. But before that, he was tugging at him, trying to force him on. And probably his best acting ever. And Marcia Clark looking over at Chris Darden and giving him the dirtiest of looks that he had made that decision to let it happen. That was, that was the final straw practically. And remember his shoes. Remember the Bruno
Magli shoes. I was just about to ask you about that. Yeah.
So he had shoes that matched it, but of course Johnny brought out that they brought in and they said that there were actually X thousands of those shoes made. It could have been a lot of killers wear Bruno Magli to the scene of a crime, but evidently he did.
So when he was acquitted, there is, and I'm going to ask David Katz, who's the lawyer who joins us on Thursdays, about this, because there is, as you sort of suggested, there is a series of inflection moments, all of which, there he is with the Bruno Maglis, that played into this. It seemed as though it was a case to me that was, because of all the evidence, how could you possibly lose it? Even with a bunch of missteps, how could you lose it? But I think you underscore the key, which is, the community that they were presenting that evidence to is ready to acquit. And they don't trust the cops, and they don't trust the cops with good reason not to trust them.
Yeah, they heard the evidence totally different than the majority population did. There's no doubt about that. If you remember, Mark, when it was the guilty verdict, the not guilty verdict was handed down, there were split screens of white community folks like glum and their heads bowed and just shocked, and African American communities yelling in support, screaming, yelling, and were very happy that he had been acquitted. So there is totally two different trials that were being seen, not only in the courtroom but also out in the public, and that we have to remember that it kind of educated us and led to later on our skepticism of when police say they didn't do it, they didn't beat the guy up, they didn't shoot him, they didn't shoot him when he didn't deserve to be shot. So now we know that it's a possibility that needs to be considered. Not always the case, but needs to be looked at carefully.
And
there also is.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to mention the sequestering, which is mentioned here in the Katie says the evidence pointed to guilt. However, Ito sent the jury out of court continually, and their sequestering or sequestration was severe. Could that have made a difference to what the jury knew? Oh, I thought the jury was just ready to end it already. They'd had enough of being sequestered. Isn't that right, Jim?
Yeah, they were anxious to get out, but I don't think, they're only supposed to consider what they see in court. So the fact that they were sequestered, I don't think made any difference in the verdict. What they didn't see was all the extraneous stuff, which they shouldn't see. They should only see what goes on in court. That's our system. That's the rules. And remember, that same evidence. So they did move the civil trial. The civil trial was in Santa Monica. And that's where the Goldman family sued him for wrongful death. And he was held responsible for Nicole Brown Simpson's death. In other words, he was held accountable for murder, but in a civil court, which meant they just got an award of millions of dollars, which they've never collected because he moved to Florida, where it was more difficult, where he could keep his house and where they couldn't get the money from him. I in fact moved to Miami at one point in my network career and saw him at a park sitting out in the park, and I went up to him, and he did not like me. He knew what was going on with coverage, and he knew that that I was critical of, said the things that I just said to you. And this was before, of course, the verdict. He mentions me in civil court. He said, I remember coming home and that Jim Avila was standing out in front of my house and he didn't leave for months, So, he knew who I was. We talked for a little bit. He was not very civil. He was not happy about that. But he went on to Florida, lived in Florida until he died.
The industry,
except for the time that he was in Nevada,
in
jail,
Vegas, in Las Vegas, he did serve probably a make good kind of sentence, meaning it was in excess of what someone else who was in the same circumstance might have served.
Yeah, I think he got 9 years for stealing back his own stuff.
Well, he had a gun. I mean, there was
What?
Well, he didn't have a gun, but his friend had a gun. Yes.
Okay, his friend had a gun. He was part of a troop that had a gun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was a not. He shouldn't have been guilty, but it was still his own stuff that he got
No,
back.
as I say, it was a make good.
Yeah.
But the industry that grew up around him, then I'll let you go here, but you're so cool. And by the way, Jim is pulled over to the side of the road. We don't need anything to say, Jim, it's not safe to speak to us while you're driving. He's pulled over. The industry that grew up around the trial. I mean, while the trial was going on, the Tonight Show did the Dancing Itos. You had, after the trial, you have Marcia Clark with her own talk show. You had, then after a few years passed, the dramatic depictions of what the trial was like and what was going on the inside. It was great, I think, boon to tabloid TV, hard copy, and those kinds of shows. So it was quite extraordinary, Jim, how it really spawned an industry. I think we may have lost Jim, but anyway, that was my thought on it. We were just finishing with Jim anyway. The only thing I wanted to ask Jim about, does anyone know what I might have still wanted to ask Jim Avila about? If you guessed...
There's always been, in this country, 30 to 35% idiots.
His drop, 30 to 35% idiots, won Mark's Madness, and it was the Cinderella story of Mark's Madness, and I wanted to ask him about that, but never got around to it. Anyway, thanks to Jim Avila for hanging out with us and reflections on the OJ case. Again, I think first to the crime scene, and then after that, they're at Rockingham, and they're in the court, and they're night after night reporting it for a couple of years until the verdict came down. So, good stuff from Jim Avila.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim's News, and we continue. David Katz, the lawyer of great repute. In fact, Albert, did you get the piece I sent you with David Katz in it?
I did. So we'll show it.
Good. Okay, so we'll show. I always talk about the fact that David's on in London with the BBC. David's on in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in New York, on Fox News Channel. So we'll play a piece from New York where you'll see how David is all over it. So smash the like button like a boss, if you would. Smash it for my voice, everyone. Please
with
do
your
it.
iron rod.
Contribute to the show to save my voice. We're crowdfunded, and. How did it go from lawyer Kardashian to Kim Kardashian? Just give me the truth, is asked. Yeah, really. And what happened to Cato? It's funny, John is asking that. Cato was another one who enjoyed this bump, right? He became famous. He was sort of the toast of the cocktail scene. He had his own show for a while. He was a favorite on games. He's a very likable guy.
All because he was living in the pool house.
Yeah. All because he was OJ's sidekick there, right? Not even Epstein got this level of grave-stomping celebration coverage from the media. Yeah, I am not going to discuss this in great detail, but I will say you can see the difference, right? OJ Simpson was a celebrity, okay? Epstein was infamous and did horrible things, but OJ Simpson was a well-known figure. He was a celebrity. He was a celebrity of film, television, sports. He was a deified figure in American culture. And then he killed 2 people, slaughtered them in cold blood, and then he was acquitted. If you don't see how that's a better narrative than Epstein, then you need to take another look at the facts. Yeah. But that's the reason that there is more grave stomping, I think. Don't forget about OJ's book. Oh, yeah, right. My Hunt for the Real Killer or whatever. What if I did do it or something? I forget what it was called.
Theoretically, hypothetically, like
yeah.
Google it.
Yeah, somebody will Google it. All right, I do have to get to Kim's news, and then we continue. Thank you for all the ways you support our show. We are a crowd-funded show, so your support matters. We're on Patreon. We're on PayPal. There are links to both under this video, the live show, and also under the various videos that we will break out from the live show. So, yes, and Battle of the Network Stars. Thank you, JT. He was a favorite on Battle of the Network Stars as well. OJ, it's so much fun to look back on a killer's life. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. This just in, a note from Jim Avila. Please tell Mark I'm sorry. The phone died. It was just too hot in the car, and it shut off. The way it goes. So that's what happened to Jim Avila. But that's all right. We got him, and I'm so happy that
we got the lion's share, but we need it from him.
That's right. Speaking of which, the O.J. Simpson has passed away at the age of 76. The Juice, as he was famously known, was a Heisman Trophy winner in college and a Hall of Famer in the NFL. Simpson's football career has long since been overshadowed, though, by legal issues, including his 1995 murder trial acquittal and his long time in prison on robbery and kidnapping charges. It was almost like they put him in jail on the robbery and the kidnapping charges for so long to kind of make up for what he should have been, found guilty for in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to Jim. It was like a make-good kind of sentence. It was way in excess of what someone would normally, get.
The sentencing is next after a jury rendered a guilty verdict in the Apple River stabbing death trial in Wisconsin. Nikolai Mew was accused of stabbing 5 people and killing a teenager. In July of 2022 on the Apple River, he claimed the group was confrontational and that he had feared for his safety. But again, the sentencing is coming next in that case. Los Angeles Dodgers star Shohei Ohtani's longtime interpreter is being federally charged with bank fraud for allegedly stealing $16 million from him. The U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles, Martin Estrada, making this announcement today. Estrada said Ipe Mizuhara made unauthorized bank transfers from Ohtani's account from late 2021 to January of this year. The interpreter is accused of using his relationship with the Japanese star to fund his gambling addiction.
I have to say, now that they've charged his interpreter / friend with this, it makes the narrative that suggests that they were both gambling, or that essentially that the translator was gambling on behalf of Ohtani. It makes that a little harder to swallow, because this is a hell of a fall he'll take. I mean, this is a felony. He'll do prison time for this, for stealing all this money, and it just gets hard. It's such a big fall to take. I mean, it's the Alan Weisselberg fall that he's going to Rikers for Trump, and this guy would go to also a federal prison for stealing from Ohtani. I mean, if he's just the fall guy, that's a huge price to pay. Now,
they're already saying that he's doing negotiations for a plea agreement to plead guilty to this.
So if he pleads guilty, we'll know more. Look, Ohtani is a brilliant ambassador for baseball and this incredible phenom. It's just incredible to me that these guys are wiring money. When I say these guys, that this guy, the translator, is wiring money to this bookie that he's stolen from Ohtani. And the last thing I'll say, and we'll move on, is that the only way this works is the latest story, which is he had figured out a way into Ohtani's account to turn off the transaction alerts that he would normally get. Mm-hmm. That is the only way that this makes sense. Otherwise, it seems to me like a cover for Ohtani being a gambler and gambling on baseball, potentially, I mean. But again, that is simply based on these fragments of information that we have, and we will learn more.
Yeah, it reeks of someone falling on their sword, and you wonder, what is he going to get in return for this type of thing? I don't know. I mean, it's obviously all speculation, but it's hard to wrap your mind around it. We'll go to Instagram because they're taking steps to protect teens from nude photos. Parent company Meta saying a new feature will detect photos containing nudity and automatically blur them when sent to users under 18. A warning screen will provide options to block the sender and report the photos. There's a woman responsible for Monday's violent double murder-suicide in the Los Angeles area. Apparently, she was fearful of the solar eclipse. This woman, Danielle Johnson, was an astrology influencer on X and called the eclipse the epitome of spiritual warfare just a few days before it happened. Police say she stabbed her boyfriend to death, threw her 2 daughters out of her moving SUV on the 405 freeway, killing her 8-month-old daughter, and then killed herself by driving into a tree at high speed. Just a horrible story.
No, it's awful. And then, the idea of who she was and what she was about. It's all crazy.
And
literally crazy, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's the way you could see it. Arizona Republicans managed to block an attempt by state Democrats to cancel the law banning abortions in the state. In the state House yesterday, Republican Representative Matt Gress joined Democrats in trying to bring a bill forward to stop this ban. With a motion in the Senate that was also denied, the Arizona Supreme Court is upholding the abortion ban, which, as we mentioned yesterday, dates back to the Civil War era. So, meanwhile, the Attorney General in Arizona is saying she won't move forward in enforcing this law. So, it's a big dust-up in Arizona over all of this.
No, you can say that again. I mean, this may literally flip the state. It may make it a blue state.
Yep. In the Russia area, they've got retaliatory measures against unfriendly states. And now Russia has seized assets of the agricultural holdings company Agroterra Group. The move against this Dutch company has sent shockwaves through the agricultural sector and raised concerns over food security and international trade. It follows a series of similar asset seizures targeting Western companies, including multinational brewer Carlsberg and a dairy giant as well. Both have sought to divest their Russian operations in response to this ongoing conflict in Ukraine. They'll take all your land and your buildings and everything you got if they don't like you. A bill to hold package thieves accountable is moving out of the California Assembly Public Safety Committee on its way to possible passage. Evan Lowe's new bill would make it a crime to enter the vicinity of a home with the intent to commit theft of any shipped packages. It creates a legal method for law enforcement to charge so-called porch pirates. California law prohibits stealing private property and packages, but there's not a punishable crime for entering the area around the home with the intent to steal. Without harsher penalties, those caught stealing packages from doorsteps face few consequences and just get right back to porch pirating away. This is kind of RoboCopy. The city of Elk Grove is going high-tech with the purchase of drones to service first responders. City officials approved the $2.1 million purchase for assisting police, but not necessarily replacing police. Calls falling under the Drones as First Responder program would include assaults, traffic incidents, and robberies, among other matters. Elk Grove Police Lieutenant Nate Lang told ABC 10 in Sacramento, and they will be able to be at any call within 3 minutes. Lang added drones will speed up response times and preserve officer safety. Well, it sounds an awful lot like you're planning to use the drones instead of the officers.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? Do they appear by video? On drone, stop. You are breaking the law.
Right, exactly. We're witnessing, we're at headquarters. Don't make us come out there.
I mean, I guess they could catch the aftermath of whatever happened right on video, on drone footage. Oh. There's a group on YouTube. They're called Dude Perfect. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
They're apparently pretty popular. They make videos and content focused on sports and humor. And they have a huge following here on YouTube. And now they have a bunch of money. They've raised more than $100 million to expand their reach and create more content. The group receiving a fundraising injection from a private equity investment firm focused on technology and media platforms. By partnering, they say, with High Mount Capital, we hope to pour gas on the fire and take dude perfect fun that families have witnessed on screens these last 15 years and turn it into real life products and memory making experiences they can touch and feel for themselves. So,
they're trick shotters on YouTube. They do like tricks.
I have seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they actually did a video in Augusta, which is where the Masters is played last year, which was they're super exclusive, and obviously they're a huge deal. So I'm not surprised by this at all.
Albert, those trick shots, I get them all the time, and I love them. What's the story on those? Those are legit, and they spend hours and days.
I'm sure they spend hours and hours. There's some other trick shotters. I know, not Dude Perfect. I'm not sure if they show all the attempts. They just show the successes, but usually they do show like 400 attempts on this and 500 attempts on that type of thing.
Yeah, they actually I love those videos where they show you all the times that it doesn't quite work. You know, those are
the barely misses. Yeah, those are heartbreaking.
Well, they say they're going to use this $100 million to build a management team, grow their team, which is now about 25 people. They say the company will be growing internationally as well, and some of their content will be in other languages. They had a revenue in 2022 of $25 million. So, Dude Perfect on YouTube. They're doing something that people like, I guess. Why can't we be Mark Perfect?
They're
exactly.
Making, some serious loot.
We're not going to get a private equity funding deal. What's going on with that? Maybe we need to take it to whatever. What's his name in San Francisco that backed Thanos? Peter Thiel.
Yeah, exactly. We need an angel investor.
We do. In New York, they're considering rodent birth control in their continuing war on rats. The New York Times reports the city council is introducing legislation calling for the distribution of salty pellets that sterilize both male and female rats. 2 neighborhoods would be targeted under a pilot program. The city has unsuccessfully tried similar methods in the past, but they want to give it another shot due to improvements in the city's handling of garbage, as well as advancements in rat contraceptives. If it works, the city wouldn't rely so much on rat poison, which is a good thing, which is partially blamed for the death of the beloved Central Park owl Flacco. It's funny, my daughter just got back from New York, and they took pictures of some rats they saw in the subway. So
they have a real problem there with it, but it's also, that rat poison, that stuff affects animals of all sorts, just like Flacco died. Yeah,
it's the food chain, right?
Exactly.
This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. It's a place to get a little bit of heaven in your Mark Thompson Show coffee mug. Find a huge selection of coffees, amazing teas. It's a treat just for you at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, and get your exclusive Mark Thompson Show 10% discount. Just put in Mark T at checkout and enjoy the good stuff.
Can you I got an email about Coachella Valley Coffee yesterday. I'd love to share it with you.
Okay.
Because it corrects me, and I apparently have made a mistake.
What?
I know, it's amazing. Because I seldom, as you know, am in error. And apparently, and it's funny, when I said this, I kind of knew. I thought, I don't think it's called this thing that I'm saying, but it's something like this. So this guy, Michael, sends me this note. Mr. Mark, love the show, buddy, and I've been listening since KGO, of course. I just want to give you a heads up. I contacted Coachella Valley as I've been enjoying their excellent coffee. I asked them about the term that you use all the time on the show, fresh grow. Remember when I talk about their coffee, first of all their coffee is hand roasted. They do a lot of stuff. Never do they just go, we're just going to automate and have no, it's all hand roasted. And the other thing is, I always say it's fresh, like it's not the leftover beans. You can find beans cheaper. of course, on the internet, and in stores. But this crop is the freshest, and so I always use the term fresh grow. But even when I use it, I thought, I don't know if that's really what it's called, but I mean, that's kind of the term I was using. So I asked them, Mark, about the term you use all the time, fresh grow. Apparently, that's not a term they use.
What? Oh, what is the term?
Yeah, exactly. Well, he goes on. It's
my bad. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to pass along to you, Mark, the feedback that I got from them so that you can be even more specific and correct regarding your favorite product.
Always a good thing.
So he sent actually a response, because you can contact them. You can email them with questions and all the rest. So they say a lot of roasters buy older crop or last year's crop because they get a cheaper price. But we always buy current crop. So the words first grow are not the term. It's always new crop. That's what they call it new crop, not
new
first
crop.
grow.
Okay.
So I misspoke.
I misspoke.
Yeah, exactly. And I stand corrected.
I stand corrected.
All right.
Did your words hurt a lot of people?
They did.
My words upset so
a lot
many
of
people.
Yeah. Look, it was wrong. It was stupid. And
It was wrong. It was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
I really am.
I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
The Asian American community. I really am sorry. So thank you, Michael, for that. Well done and well corrected. Appreciate that.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Morning.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
Mark Thompson. Smash it with your iron rod. Thank you so much.
This thing is ready to pop, people.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
No.
I stand corrected.
Thompson, party of four.
You, sir, are a liar. Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
Don't talk to me that way.
Let me kick down the door and talk to my cheap sons and daughters.
Girl, you just
processes and protocols and standards.
Dr. Emil Schaffhausen, Sassert.
Seriously, what the?
What can you tell us about the scene?
I've received a lot of positive letters.
You should apologize for how you feel. This is a man with anger. This is a man that has resentment towards you.
I love it when you're angry.
You know what, Hal? You created havoc and chaos.
Can you let him finish, sir?
Sayonara, sucker.
Right on, right on, right on. Yeah, big shout out to all our Patreon and PayPal supporters. Thank you for keeping us going. You keep the show growing and going. Appreciate that. I have a fork in the road, Albert, and I will turn to you as producer to make a decision.
Albert, thank you.
I have a law and disorder, and I also have, well, I guess I could consider it law and disorder. I have inflation news that's kind of interesting. Like, you wouldn't have expected what I'm saying, but maybe I could save the inflation stuff. I think people would like the law and disorder. I think the kids like law and disorder.
Yeah, I love the Law and Disorder too, and I think a couple stories maybe for Law and Disorder before we get to David Katz, because he's coming up very shortly.
Here we go then. This is Law and Disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Well, I mentioned it. Trump's ex-finance chief, 5 months in Rikers for perjury. I don't know what you've heard about the remodeling at Rikers, Kim, but it's still not a great place to spend 5 months. And even though I know you're saying, yeah, Mark, but the summer months are lovely at Rikers. No, they're really not. It's not like the brochures.
No.
Alan Weisselberg admitting that he lied about helping Trump inflate his net worth to win favorable loan terms. You kind of know the dance they did and the lying dance that Weisselberg did. And you talk about a guy who has, really taken the heat for Trump. Weisselberg's now going to head up the river.
What is he?
Rikers.
Is it 5 months that he's serving?
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah?
Yeah, 5 months, exactly.
He's
that's 76.
A long time for an older guy, right?
Yeah, it's a long time for any of us.
Who knows what's going to happen to you in that place?
No fun. Meantime, a bizarre story about a woman who was trying to sell President Joe Biden's daughter's diary. And this Florida mother sentenced this week to a month in prison and 3 months of home confinement for stealing and selling President Joe Biden's daughter's diary.
Does that not seem like enough to you? I mean, she's stealing someone's innermost thoughts and secrets and trying to profit off of it, and she gets a month in jail and 3 years probation? It's ridiculous.
Well, it does seem light to me, but Amy Harris is her name, and she was sentenced in Manhattan federal court, and the judge did call her actions despicable. She pleaded guilty. She got $20,000 of the $40,000 that was paid by Project Veritas. You know Project Veritas, they're usually involved in hidden camera stings and trying to embarrass journalists and government officials, labor organizations, Democratic politicians. They're right-wing, but they busted a lot of people doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, found a lot of stuff that isn't cool based on surreptitious recordings. Anyway, they bought the diary. They wanted it. They were looking for that stuff. So they were paying $40K. She got $20K of it. She apologized in court. As I say, she was in tears. The writings of Ashley Biden were to be sold. And she found the diary and other items at a friend's Delray Beach, Florida home in 2020, where prosecutors said that Ashley Biden thought that her items were safely stored when she temporarily stayed there in 2020. And as we've seen, they were not safely stored.
No, and you would think, though, and not to blame Ashley Biden because, she's the victim in this case, but if you're a Biden, just like if you're a Trump, right? And you know that there's people doing Oppo research or people that would love to get their hands on whatever it is you're writing. You got to hold on to that stuff. You can't trust a friend to say, I'll store it for you. No, that's too good for somebody to get their hands on.
Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, if I gave you something to hold on to for me, can I not trust you?
You could trust me.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the situation.
You probably shouldn't trust anyone.
Well, I mean, you have to put your stuff somewhere, and it's going to be in the custody of someone. So I'm just saying. I mean, I'm not blaming her. I'm not blaming Ashley Biden. Mm-hmm. The 2023 shooting at a Virginia elementary school in which a 6-year-old student shot the teacher. Remember this one? We talked about it, of course, at the time. Yeah. It was an unavoidable situation, according to a special grand jury. This is a newly released report. They cited poor decision-makings in the lead-up to the shooting. This is an 11-member panel investigating this January 6th, 2023 shooting at Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News. They found a shocking, this is a quote, lack of response by the former assistant principal despite several warnings about the child. I thought it was remarkable that they turned a blind eye to all the warnings they had about this kid, you'll remember. The report highlights a series of security failures and many, quote, behavioral problems involving the child before the shooting that wounded first-grade teacher Abigail Zwerner. The school's former assistant principal, Ebony Parker, resigned about 3 weeks after the shooting. She was charged with 8 counts of child abuse and disregard for life by a special grand jury. That just happened last month. Each of those 8 felony counts carries a maximum potential sentence of 5 years in prison. So if convicted, Parker could face up to 40 years in prison. Again, she was the former assistant principal who was facing that. So it's not as though turning a blind eye to that hasn't some potential consequences. It does. And finally, this crew around the Bay Area, a burglary crew that went around sledgehammering Bay Area stores. They stole nearly $1 million in cigarettes. People are now being blamed, and the cops are calling them, this gang, the F Everyone gang. Are you familiar with them, Kim?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, if you're going to have a gang name, that's pretty strong, right?
It's a very strong brand. You're right. They've been linked to at least 34 burglaries, an estimated loss of almost $1 million, $970,000, within a 2-month span. They successfully evaded pursuing officers time and time again. They made off with $200,000 from a Chanel store in Southern California, and even allegedly recorded a rap music video featuring a stolen Jeep that had been at half a dozen of those burglaries, according to the authorities.
What?
Yeah.
They're like, we don't care. We're just going to showcase all our stolen stuff.
It's not a good look for law enforcement. Yeah. Police identified 3 suspects who they claim are part of this Oakland-based gang.
The F everything's.
F Everyone. The gang is a subset, they say, of a larger group known as ENT. They've been linked to a bunch of shootings around the East Bay, including a lengthy rivalry with the Oakland-based Case Gang. So you've got the Case Gang, you've got ENT, and you've got F Everyone. But it was F Everyone that made it away with $1 million in jacked stuff.
Oh.
Burglaries in Benicia, Union City, Vacaville, Concord, Brentwood, San Leandro, Vallejo, Livermore. Should I go on? I can. Tracy, Walnut Creek, Dublin, Oakland, and as far south as San Diego. These guys were all over all this stuff. And there's only one suspect in custody, a 26-year-old guy named Robert Lee Johnson of Tracy and Oakland. And he is the key to this F Everyone gang, but he's the only guy in custody. That's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you for being here. We had a wild day yesterday where the connection between a bunch of shows all over YouTube, we were one of them, and the YouTube stream just went away. So we did kind of an audio-only show. So we're happy to have our video back. In fact, I saw somebody in the chat, Michael says, I love this new video component of your show today. It is kind of wild. Also in the chat, Cato was Nicole Simpson's friend, says Underdog. He first lived in her guest house and babysat her and OJ's kids. I guess I'd forgotten that. Yeah, and then, of course, he got close to OJ and they hung out. And on Jim Avila, Josh says, I mentioned the 30 to 35% idiots to my dad, and he disagreed. He said 45%.
Oh, yeah.
There's always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
Yeah, 45%. You wouldn't go broke betting on that. And Spencer Jaffe, love you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the super sticker. A $5
big shout
super
out
sticker from Spencer, who is a regular supporter. Do love him. And all of you who support the show through Patreon and PayPal and with super stickers and super chats, you're just awesome. Thank you for your support. Albert, I turn to you again as producer of this show. Tell me what the situation is. Katz is not here yet, right?
I'm sure Katz isn't here, but by the time we decide to do like another story, he will be here. But we could try to fit one in if we can.
Well, I've got a chunk of Trump. You want to do it?
Yeah, let's
All right.
give me one.
Why
second.
not? This, my friends, you ready? This
Yeah, I'm ready.
This is your chunk of Trump.
Open wide. Ready? Here comes your chunk of Trump.
It's my favorite food.
With your first bite, here's Mark Thompson.
I have a feeling it's going to be beautiful.
It's a great honor, my friends. It's a great honor. So let me begin with Lord David Cameron. Yes. Lord David Cameron holding talks with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. It's a surprise meeting. He's a foreign secretary. He had dinner with the former U.S. president in Florida, despite the fact that Lord Cameron called Trump previously divisive, stupid, and wrong. He's now had a little bit of a change of heart. Maybe he had a face-to-face meeting with Trump. It's part of this effort to secure more U.S. funding for the war in Ukraine. So he's thinking maybe Trump can prevail upon his fractured GOP caucus, if you will, or constituency, whatever you want to call them, his pals who make up the madness that is the GOP, everyone from Marjorie Taylor Green to Mike Johnson. He visited Mar-a-Lago, despite previously calling him protectionist, xenophobic, and misogynistic, and denouncing his policies as divisive, stupid, and wrong.
And now he's headed that way.
Yeah, and now he's...
What?
My words upset so many people.
Yeah, it's tough to walk that back, but he has walked it back, I guess.
My bad. I'm sorry.
The foreign secretary visited Trump, and the meeting included a dinner. It was the first between a senior minister and Mr. Trump since Trump left office in 2021. The two men also talked about the strength of the UK-US relationship and the special relationship between the two countries. Lord Cameron is on a high-profile visit to the U.S. to press Republicans to pass that blocked package for Ukraine and also discuss Israel's war in Gaza. This is the latest in a series of interventions made by the foreign secretary. So that happening there. And karma for a Trump spokesperson. Yeah. The spokesperson trying to attack Joe Biden as someone who can hardly speak. But then she gets onto television and says the transcript in her report was the report on Joe Biden and, with the special counsel's report.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, Mark, David
Katz
is
is
here,
waiting.
but
Okay.
yeah.
She said it was incredibly damning. I mean, I can't even say it the way she said it. Damning.
Someone's having trouble speaking, huh?
Yeah, and then you thought, well, maybe she might have misspoken, It's an odd time to misspeak when you're saying that Biden can hardly speak. She literally said those words.
Sure.
But then she repeated this non-word moments later. It was also extremely damning to him politically, as it showed what the American people see with their own eyes every single day. And she goes on, that Joe Biden can hardly speak. So she's an idiot. I mean, really, the bottom of the barrel. But again, that was on Newsmax, and she was, if we had more time, we'd actually play it for you. But you get the idea. That is your chunk of Trump.
That's it for this edition.
Well, I really enjoyed it.
But make sure to join us again next time
I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening.
for another chunk of Trump.
Glad you're here. Smash that like button like a boss.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, it helps us in the YouTube universe if you hit the like button. It costs nothing, and we appreciate the thumbs up. This guy joins us on Thursdays. He's so terrific to give us time. And I always mention that he's on BBC, he's on London radio, he's on in New York, he's on Fox News Channel, he's in San Francisco, he's in Los Angeles, he's on all of these different media outlets. And finally, I just decided it would be fun to share with you a little bit of David Katz on New York television. Go ahead and roll it, Albert.
Mayor Eric Adams under the microscope again as the FBI continues its investigation into possible illegal foreign donations for his 2021 mayoral campaign.
There's certainly some bad looks to some of this stuff.
This time, federal officials want to know whether the mayor received free upgrades when flying Turkish Airlines, Turkey's national carrier, in exchange for political favors.
I don't think they can prove that there was a quid pro quo.
This investigation is part of a wider corruption investigation involving Turkish airline executives, aides to the mayor, and the mayor himself. David Katz is a former assistant U.S. attorney.
They can prove that there was a quid. Yes, he got upgrades, but they can't prove that there was a quo. They can't prove that he did anything corrupt for Turkish Airlines or for the government of Turkey in exchange.
In November, as part of this probe, the FBI raided the home of Mayor Adams' top campaign fundraiser, and then a week later, they seized his cell phones. The raids come after the approval of a new Turkish consulate when Adams was Brooklyn Borough president. According to the New York Times, Turkish officials asked Adams to resolve building safety violations that were preventing the Turkish consulate from opening in Manhattan. Adams allegedly reached out to the then FDNY commissioner when he was still borough president.
If they report that there were fire problems, if they report that it got opened prematurely on account of the mayor's influence, that's one thing. But to just say that he tried to get it opened up and they dragging their feet and they opened it up and it's all fine under fire regulations, I don't think he did anything wrong.
The mayor's attorney responding to the allegations. In a statement to Fox 5, he says, quote, as borough president, the mayor consistently disclosed his official travel to Turkey, did not receive any improper upgrades, and did nothing inappropriate in exchange for an upgrade. Speculation is not evidence.
I think they're pretty much conceding he did get the upgrades. Question is, did he do anything corrupt in exchange? If they can prove that, the FBI has a stronger case, no doubt about it. But I still think on balance, the mayor will not be indicted as a result of this investigation.
I love it. That's our David Katz. Sorry, I think the volume was a little low. That's what I'm seeing in the chat. That's why I laid out. But how about it for David Katz, everybody? Former federal prosecutor and now working the defense side of the table. Hello, sir.
Great to be with you, Mark.
That mayor in New York, he's hip deep in it, I guess, huh? Yeah.
Well, it was fun to be on that show, and it was also broadcast from Lincoln Center, Mark. Can you hear me? It was also broadcast from Lincoln Center on the west side of Manhattan. So it was just a great backdrop with people getting out of the matinee of Turandot behind me.
Look at you. You're a cultured guy. Well, let me ask you about something that just happened, and it made me wonder what this is a little bit of blindsiding you, but I know you've formed an opinion on it. O.J. Simpson just died. We did a pretty good chunk at the beginning of the show with one of the, if not the first reporter on the scene, and then covered it wall to wall, both at the crime scene at Rockingham and in the courtroom. And we sort of reviewed some of the highlights and some of the things that were memorable about the trial, and obviously he was acquitted in that first trial. My question to you is a legal one. As you looked at the legal part of it, leaving aside what seemed to be clear based on, what one could surmise based on what we knew, legally, did you see that the prosecution did not make a good case in that first O.J. Simpson trial?
I thought that they presented more than sufficient evidence. I thought that if I had been a juror and I heard a lot of the trial, focused on the trial a lot, I would have found him guilty. But, Mark, you're not blindsiding me because we haven't even spoken about this. Pat Thurston and I used to speak about this because she was on with Erwin Chemerinsky at the time, who went on to be dean of my law school, University of California at Berkeley Law School. But Pat and I used to talk about this. I was an OJ commentator. That's really where I started commentating on legal matters. And I fell into it. It's a great story if you'd like to know. But I was on TV on KCAL, Channel 9 in Los Angeles with Pat Harvey during the Bronco chase. They were just looking for lawyers that they wanted on the air. And I had a fraud case, which had been on the front page of the Daily News. So I think they went through their Rolodex with every lawyer who'd been in the LA Times, and then they went on to the Daily News. And I was on the front page that day. So a producer called me up. It's always hard to get a hold of me because there's like 10 David Katzes, right? But he got a hold of the right David Katz, invited me on the program, and the slow speed chase took so long. Remember, it preempted the NBA finals basketball game, and suddenly every station, you looked up on the TVs, every single station, from sports to news, the sitcoms, were preempted. Everybody was watching, yes, this slow speed chase. And they had a psychologist on there, and they asked him, if you turn to the left, if you turn to the right, what does it mean about your childhood? What does it mean about that? And I said, I think he's turning left because that's where his house is. He's going back to. And they love me. They love that line. He's turning left because that's where his house is at. And then they had me on all the time. And we did a show on Channel 9 with Pat Harvey called OJ Tonight. The entire news and sports and weather was worth 1/2 hour, and OJ was worth the next half hour. So at 10:30, we came on with OJ Tonight. It was me and another commentator. I was considered the sort of pro-prosecution one because I had recently left the U.S. Attorney's Office. The other was more of the straight criminal defense attorney. Well, don't you see there was reasonable doubt on account of this, and that didn't go in well, and that guy was really well cross-examined by Johnny Cochran and the other defense attorneys. And we did that every single night during the OJ trial. And people who weren't around then or who were under a rock and weren't watching television at the time, people had OJ withdrawal. That was a real thing. It was like the show that they watched every day. They talked to their friends about it. And when it suddenly ended, especially in an acquittal, so there weren't post-trial motions, there wasn't sentencing, it ended kind of cold turkey, like The Sopranos or like Mad Men. And people really missed it in the same sense. There was OJ withdrawal. And, you always play that clip, Mark. There's never been anything like it. Truly, for younger people, there was never anything like it. We never had a televised trial. We had depictions of trials. We had like the movie about the Scopes trial. And we had Perry Mason, which tried to approximate the high moments of a trial. But we never had anything like OJ. And people got so into the narrative. They got into the different characters. There were people that I saw Cato Kalin, the guy who slept on the couch, on national TV today. And it had all these characters. It had a guy named Al Kamens who drove him around. It had
Collins, yeah, that's right.
There it is, yeah. And they had a guy who said, OJ told me a dream, and Judge Ito led in the dream. And then these are the huge days of late night TV. So, of course, Jay Leno was the top show then. He lampooned it every night, and he had a bunch of fellows called the Dancing Itos. And so when Ito issued, we haven't had the dancing loose cannons, right, in the Trump thing. We haven't had.
That's actually really that's a great point. I was making the point in the first hour. There was an industry that grew up around it, and then there was even a post-trial industry. Marcia Clark got a talk show I was mentioning, and there were even dramatic depictions a few years after the trial ended. There was an OJ fever, and what was revealed about the justice system to me, I thought was interesting as well. In a way, we were seeing what happens in a court, but in another way, David, it wasn't really representative of what happens in a court, right?
Well, he had this terrific defense team. They were called the Dream Team. There was Johnny Cochran, there was Bob Shapiro. I knew both of them well. Then he brought in this group from the Innocent Project, and they've gone on to do great things, with people.
Barry Scheck, you mean, those guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wrongly incarcerated. And then the DNA was a huge issue. And I still remember Larry King asking, so what's this DNA? With that great voice of his.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Yeah.
I went to the Bronx High School of Science, but I hadn't really kept up with, every aspect of the DNA. And then everybody got kind of allotted to their own station. So I was on 9, and I looked up on the board because they had all the TV screens in the newsroom. And I think 4 of my colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office were on at the same time. There was a woman that I knew from the U.S. Attorney's Office who was on 2. There was a fellow named Manny Medrano, a good friend of mine. He was on 4. And so it went. And the famous person from that era, from the commentators, was Greta Van Susteren. She was on Fox 11 in L.A., and she went on to get a big contract with Fox and was on there for years. Can I tell my Johnny Cochran?
She was an OJ advocate a bit on, as I recall. But
Mark, if I could just interrupt you for 1 second, we were considered the most pro OJ station, KCAL. And I hope you love all these stories. I mean, OJ has just passed, and I don't know how much time you want to spend.
No, I'm glad we're spending a minute, but back to my question, which was, were we seeing what a real I mean, this is it's a celebrity case. There's all this money. There's the dream team you talk about. There's this the judge who seemed to be celebrity struck also, meeting in chambers with Geraldo and all. I mean, there was a madness to it all. As you say, there's an insatiable appetite on the part of the public for more analysis. I mean, your phone was ringing off the hook at the time. And I guess what I'm asking is, can you, and then of course what was revealing about a jury, we talked about this in the first hour, was it's all about the jury. The jury didn't see that evidence as sticking. They saw it quite believable that the cops could have planted that evidence because they had seen it in their own community. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to the trial itself. What could we take from the trial about the justice system in America?
Well, I know that you did a murder mystery a while ago, because I saw it. It was great, about the Von Bulow case, the one that made Alan Dershowitz famous. Since then, a lot of people think he's become infamous, but it certainly made him famous. And he had that book, Reversal of Fortune, that became the movie. So we had seen high-profile acquittals before. I'd worked only on the pretrial appeal of the John DeLorean case. Other people that I had nothing to do with tried that case. It ended up being an acquittal in federal court. So we'd seen high-profile acquittals. I think the thing that surprised me was I thought that OJ had a very fair trial. I thought, generally speaking, it wasn't that skewed. I didn't think that Judge Ito was starstruck, given that he decided to have the case, on national television, and this fascination that started to revolve around it, and the personalities and everything, and the dancing Itos on Jay Leno's show and all that kind of stuff. I thought that Judge Ito did a good job. I don't think that he was starstruck or anything like that. I think the defense attorneys did a particularly good job. It was downtown, a largely minority jury, and one of the interesting things in the case was that Gil Garcetti, who was the district attorney at the time, could have pursued the case in Santa Monica. The events happened in a place where it would have been logically venued in Santa Monica. He decided to bring the case downtown. And at least according to sources I had at the time, because I was on television so much, I had sources. I had people trying to spin me, right? So believe him or don't believe him. But I had sources that told me that Garcetti was willing to take an acquittal if that's what ended up happening. But he couldn't take challenging minority jurors the way they're often challenged. Now, you can debate our system. There are a lot of racial stereotypes that go on both sides. They're not supposed to. They're technically illegal. There's what's called a Batson challenge in federal court, that you cannot peremptorily challenge a juror, even though you have peremptory challenges to, let's say, 6 or 8 of the prospective jurors. But you can't challenge them solely on the basis of race. So the judge will say, are you challenging that person solely on the basis of race? And the prosecutor will say, if it's typical situations, the prosecutor, it's an African-American jury, that's been the paradigm. No, it was their answer about the police. That was my reason. It was the way that they wore their hair in dreadlocks, something like that. That could be legitimate. You weren't challenging them because they were black. You were challenging them because they were the black person with dreadlocks. And it would go the other side too. The government wasn't allowed. The prosecution wasn't allowed to challenge based on that. But still, there would be a perception. Let's say 12 people got brought in, and it ended up that Garcetti and his prosecutors had challenged 10 of those minority jurors for some kind of cause or on their peremptory challenge. At least my source said that Garcetti was not willing to live with that. He was willing to live with an acquittal if it came to that. And so he brought the case downtown. He also didn't go to a grand jury. He went to a preliminary hearing, for those who remember the case well. And that was the so-called trial before the trial. And they spent like 2 weeks on this trial before the trial, which exposed the prospective witnesses to another round of cross-examination by the defense attorneys. It seemed odd that the prosecution, when it could have gone to the grand jury and avoided having witnesses presented publicly, because that was also televised, and cross-examined, that they would have gone to that. So it was really fascinating, all of the things that happened in that case. But I think in general, there was a fair trial. One more story, because I was on KCAL and because we were perceived as the most unbiased against OJ, there was a juror who got thrown off the jury in the middle of it. and she chose KCAL to tell her story. And I was there with Pat Harvey and this juror. And I mean, everybody wanted to talk to her because she'd been on the jury. We wanted to hear what her impressions were. And to a certain extent, to a large extent, she could talk about what her impressions were. She'd been discharged from the jury. And she had the famous line that she was really mad at the police and the prosecution because they hadn't given OJ time to grieve. And of course, all the wags and the cynics, right, said, time to grieve. You know, if you kill your wife, you may get arrested before you really have had time to grieve. And back and forth it went. You know, Mark, people were very polarized on this case. A lot of it was on racial grounds. And then when the jury's verdict was announced, they say it was the second most watched event after the 1969 landing on the moon, because we knew the night before that there had been a verdict. And we didn't know what the verdict was going to be. That was going to be read at like 9:30 or 10 the next morning. And that was supposedly the second most viewed event at the time. And one last story, Mark, because I love all this. We were going to do a huge thing on KCAL for an hour the night before. And I was going to advocate that, of course, based on the evidence and the law, from what I had seen during the trial, he was going to be found guilty. And somebody else was going to take the other side. The person who'd been a criminal defense attorney his whole life was going to take the other side. I had to go to San Francisco that afternoon for an appearance the next morning. And so I missed proclaiming to the world that I thought that OJ was going to be found not guilty. But I'm telling that story just for you, Mark Thompson, years later.
Lucky. You know, it's funny. If you hadn't been positioned that way, the way they were going to position you with the not guilty, with the guilty, you representing that, did you feel at that time in your gut, David Katz, that he was going to walk, that he was going to be acquitted?
No, I really did not, because I thought that there was evidence that they had found in the case that even if Mark, oh my goodness,
Furman,
he was the most
famous, the guy who used the
Mark
N-word.
Furman. Yeah, there's so many famous Marks, including the Apostle, right? But he was the famous Mark of the case. Mark, say it again. Furman.
Who
Furman,
was with
used the N-word.
F. Lee Bailey, I guess, was, as I recall, questioning him, right? And he said, "Have you ever used the N-word, sir?" And he said, "No, absolutely not. I haven't. Marine to Marine, I haven't. You know, whatever, right?"
And he told his story to a reporter. Like, everybody got the fame bug, so, you know, they were gonna write a book. They were gonna have a TV show. And Furman had apparently told this writer or ghostwriter, and I think she had even tapes. I don't want to.
Exactly. She had tapes with him saying the N-word over and over again.
So that was a terrible look, of course. But even if they were trying to frame OJ, and my view on it was that if there was one black man in America that the LAPD did not want to frame, it was OJ Simpson. He was the big friend of the cops. He was a totally establishment person. May he rest in peace. But he was a totally establishment person. I thought he was the least likely person that they would try to frame or railroad. But even if you believe that narrative, there were places that I thought, following the evidence, that nothing could have been planted. I thought there were other things like that. And I thought that, you know, it was just implausible. You know, where was he? What was his alibi? All these other things that pointed to his guilt. So I felt very confident that was a defensible position, that he was going to be found not guilty. I got to tell you one more story, because I just love all this stuff. I knew Johnny Cochran really well. I knew a lot of these lawyers really well because I'd been an assistant U.S. attorney into like 1990. And this trial was, you know, in the early 90s. So I'd come out of the U.S. attorney's office just a few years before, and I knew, you know, a lot of these people. I had tried a case, swear to God, I had tried a case against Johnny Cochran, and I had won about a couple of years before that. And it was in federal court. And Johnny didn't articulate this phrase, but I think it was percolating in his mind, because his defense was basically, if the shoes don't fit, you must acquit. Now, he hadn't come up with that great expression yet, but two guys, it was like that Get Shorty movie. Two guys came from Miami. Each one had a suitcase. The mule had the cocaine in the suitcase. But all the luggage in that suitcase was the mule's. Mr. Big, who was represented by Johnny Cochran, Mr. Big didn't have any of the clothes in his suitcase. So if worse came to worse, Mr. Big, Johnny Cochran's client, was going to say that the suitcase and the cocaine in it and all the clothes in it. So Johnny was, you know, going through what size were the shoes, right? If the shoes don't fit, you must acquit. But he didn't have the rhyme. He was still working on that great line. He ended up getting found guilty. And the big mistake that Mr. Big made, even with his plan to get acquitted if it came to that, was when they actually reached into the mule's suitcase and they found the cocaine and got real near it. He rabbited. And that was all these great, argot slang expressions. But to rabbit was to mean to run from the scene of the crime. So instead of playing it off and being cool, like, well, I don't know, somebody else's suitcase, he freaked out and ran through the airport. And so when you added that piece of evidence to it, Johnny's client was convicted, but he had 2 black jurors. And when he started to give his closing argument, the way he had that, he was good with everybody. But those 2 black jurors, I said to myself, this is going to be 10-2. We're going to be trying this case again. And then the 2 black jurors voted guilty, too. It was a unanimous guilty verdict. And of course, Johnny Cochran was the sort of person, he was a wonderful person, and we became really good friends after that, which is the way the world should be. It's the way people think it is. You fight like hell. You both, don't give any quarter. You fight within the bounds of ethics. And then you run into each other a month later and you have a drink together. Johnny was that kind of guy, a wonderful guy.
Sadly, I think the culture of media has now made those moments harder, made the kind of relationships harder because everybody is, their brand is hate a lot of the time. And, you've found it in some of these high profile trials as well. I love these reflections and the audience loves it as well. And, we think of Johnny Cochran as sort of the Patrick Mahomes of lawyers, and then you tell a story about, well, I'll tell you, I beat Patrick Mahomes that day in court. I mean, it was in a very high-profile case. I want to ask you about, now moving off of the O.J. Simpson trial, I want to ask you about this decision in Arizona. The court now taking up this case and citing a law from the 1800s that, predated even the statehood for Arizona. Can you speak to just the legal underpinnings of this and what the future might be?
I think as a pure legal matter, it makes sense. It's easy to ridicule, make America 1864 again. But think about it. There's a territory. The territory passes a law against normal murder, right? And it has grades of murder, then it has manslaughter. And then there's never anything that's passed from the time that it became a territory until it became a state until now, right? So it would be governed, the law of that state would be governed by that 1864 law when they were a territory. Shame on Arizona that it never passed a law after that. And there were, of course, efforts, all blocked by Republicans, all blocked by anti-choice advocates, to ever change that law. And that Carrie Lake down there, who now says she's against that 4-2 decision of the Arizona Supreme Court, said the exact opposite. She said, if they get rid of Roe v. Wade, we've got this great old law in Arizona that will kick in and be in effect. Now that it's kicked in and it's in effect, a lot of people like her and Trump are going, oh my God, because this was a talking point. This was a rallying cry to get, Republicans, some Republicans, and anti-choice advocates to the polls and to make a big issue and to contribute to the Republican Party. And now the chickens have come home to roost. So legally, it seems to me that this is a statute. You can get rid of this old statute by passing a new statute. And the Democrats tried immediately the next day to pass a new statute, but the Republican-controlled legislatures down there defeated their efforts, wouldn't put the bill forward, and they adjourned for a week. Now I think Trump and Lake and all these people are going to figure out, this is just hurting the Republicans politically too much. We have to put this in the rearview mirror, and they'll pass some kind of statute down there that will put this in the rearview mirror. Will the advocates of choice agree with that statute? No, but it will not be a total, complete ban with no exceptions, even for rape or incest, which is the state of the law down there, because that was the 1864 Territorial Act down there in Arizona. That's still in effect because it's never been superseded or changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. The laws that coexisted on the books at that time, one of them was about beating your wife, I think. You had to make sure that the curtains were drawn before you could beat your spouse. I mean, it's like because they didn't want that to be exposed to the public type thing. You realize the antiquated and horrifying orientation of those who crafted this legislation to begin with, and the notion that it could be dusted off and presented this way, and as you say, enshrined now, is something that is yet another bizarre twist in this country that we live in. You characterize it so well. I mean, they are going to have to figure out something, because otherwise this will haunt them all the way to the election. Not to mention the real effect it has on women. I mean, it's just this is an awful on healthcare. I mean, it's an awful thing.
Mark, one of those advocacy groups figures out how far and how long it would take a person to get an abortion if they live in certain places, like let's say Georgia. It's hundreds of miles, and it's a lot of time. So someone now in Arizona, assuming they could get off work and they had the money and could figure out how to do it, would now have to drive many hours and hundreds of miles, because they'd have to go to New Mexico. And, Arizona's a big state. If you're in the middle of Arizona, you have to go to New Mexico, take time off work. You could come to California. Luckily, California and New York and some other states have made it very easy, if you can get to our states, right, to have this procedure. And so that's certainly something. And then even the medical, the pill, right, the abortion pill, would be illegal in those states, because anybody who gets you the abortion pill, as things stand right now in Arizona, or any doctor who participates, or even the pharmacist or someone, I guess the Uber driver, if they know they're bringing you that pill, would be technically in violation of the law. And of course, the doctors and nurses rightly are freaked out down there, because the decision, the 4-2 decision, says this will put doctors and other health care professionals on notice that they are violating criminal law if they provide or assist in an abortion. Talk about chilling. And people say, well, that may or may not go into effect for 2 weeks. It may not go into effect for 45 days. Really? Do you want to be a nurse or doctor doing anything to provide someone with an abortion when you're facing, forget that you might not have your liability coverage, but you get dragged into court. And the attorney general down there says that she won't prosecute, right? But you're in some little, anti-choice, part of the state, and some DA, drags you into court, and you're a doctor or nurse. So this is a disaster down there. It absolutely has to be cured. And you can see that, this is what a lot of the Republicans had in mind when they put these 3 justices on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. It's not just an intellectual talking point. And this has been their goal. The Federalist Society and their ilk have had this as their goal for 40 years, Mark, to pack the court with these justices. And it just was not that huge an issue for Democrats and liberals and people who were pro-choice, because it seemed really like Roe v. Wade was the law of the land. Maybe people got a little bit complacent, but they've gotten very uncomplacent now. And this is a terrible topic politically for the Republicans, because if people are talking about this, 20-30% more people are for sensible choice laws than they are for what we're seeing in Arizona and what we saw from the U.S. Supreme Court.
I like that you use the word complacent, because I was talking about complacency the other day when this happened. And I think Kim and I were speaking of, now this is going to motivate women to get out, and you're going to hear from women. But my vision was, how come with that open Supreme Court seat in 2016, we didn't see a show on the part of those who recognize the power of infesting the court with people of the sort that rolled back Roe? I would have liked to have seen, to me, it was clear you could be a single issue voter on just that issue at the time. And I thought it was defensible, to just vote blue for that reason alone. And now we've seen the effects, and it's frightening, and it's not over. So we must move on, though, and I want to ask you about what's happening in New York City. The Trump trial is an interesting one from a legal standpoint. I read more and more, David, that there are sort of legally tenuous relationships between what Trump was doing and the way they're pursuing this trial and the hush money case. Can you speak to this a little bit?
Sure. Well, when you say legally tenuous, it seems to me like a very, legitimate prosecution. The federal government decided that they didn't want to pursue this. You have to use prosecutorial discretion I think that, the people who say, well, my goodness, Merrick Garland and his Department of Justice didn't go on this case as a federal violation. They went on Michael Cohen when Trump was in office. I mean, you could certainly say, well, Trump wanted to get Cohen, and Trump's Department of Justice wanted to get Cohen. And when you looked at it just from that point of view, once Merrick Garland and once a new U.S. attorney appointed by President Biden was in office in the Southern District of New York, how big a priority was it? I mean, everyone had seen the insurrection. Everyone figured the insurrection case was going to some kind of prosecution. You can also say that, they had other resources. They prosecuted an awful lot of very important cases in the Southern District of New York. So it doesn't mean that Trump was certified clean, but it'll certainly talk about the fact that these were righteous federal charges. They weren't brought, and he's going to say, well, they weren't righteous because they weren't brought. That doesn't follow at all. Trump also allegedly violated state law by the same cover-up of the payoff to Stormy Daniels done through Michael Cohen. And it seems very clear to me that these false entries were false because they said it was attorney's fees, and they weren't attorney's fees. Trump has never been able to show what service Michael Cohen was performing that entitled him to this monthly paycheck. And isn't it amazing that those monthly paychecks that Cohen got ended adding up to the amount that he had taken out of his pocket and paid off Stormy Daniels to make this whole thing confusing. And since he was going to say it was a legal fee, Trump had to give him enough money that he could pay taxes because he was going to declare it. It came in checks. Trump himself signed the checks. So it seems to me like a very legitimate case. But at the same time, the problem that I see in it is that in order to bump it up to a felony and not just misdemeanors, that Trump has to be shown beyond a reasonable doubt, Mark, to have known and intended to violate state campaign financing laws. So he has the defense, I only did it for Melania, I didn't do it for campaign violations. If they believe that, that would be, there would be a reasonable doubt. The reasonable doubt would be it's reasonable that he had a different motive. Likewise, if he only knew that this was a violation of federal law or there was some kind of federal regulation, campaign contribution, but who knew the state had such a thing? He really didn't know state law. Michael Cohen never explained it to him. He never read anything about it. Then it would be a misdemeanor. As I said before on your show, I don't think he's going to go to prison for this offense, even if he's found guilty. So you can say, what difference does it make if it's a misdemeanor or a felony? The point is that a jury unanimously convicted him of criminal violations, but you can see that Trump will ballyhoo the fact that it was just misdemeanors, this is, the mouse that roared, all of this to create a little misdemeanor. What's that, like a traffic ticket? They spent how much money? They spent millions of dollars and years of investigation, and they gave all these people breaks so they could prove a traffic ticket against me.
Yeah, you really characterize it well. I guess when I was speaking about tenuousness, I was trying to speak to the way they were tying the business fraud to what you were talking about, which you kind of reference it, that some kind of running afoul of campaign directives.
Well, Mark, that was the big case that they had this special prosecutor. I mean, I think Cyrus Vance, who was the longtime district attorney there in Manhattan, I think he really has some explaining to do. I see him on CNN and other stations, and he really hasn't explained, why didn't you pursue this while you were in office, okay? When you had these special prosecutors, you had these two people who knew this case inside and out, and he was going to bring both this campaign violation thing with Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels and the falsified business records that Trump signed off on. Trump wrote those checks. They have him actually writing something. This guy who never wanted to touch anything or write anything. Plus, you have Michael Cohen testifying about it. But on top of that, saying that the apartment was 3 times as large as it was, that could have been criminal. That's a fraud on banks. I represent people who are charged with that sort of thing all the time. They would laugh at me if I said, well, why are you bringing this in federal court? This is what federal courts do. This is what federal prosecutors do. They bring case. Some people call the FBI federal bank investigators. They protect the banks. Sure. They protect the big companies. This is exactly what they do. If you lie to a big company, if you lie to a bank, and they can prove that you did it, as they could with Trump, you get prosecuted for it. So why wasn't all of that brought in state court? It could have also been brought in federal court, but it could have been brought in state court. It could have been done by Alvin Bragg's predecessor. Instead, he kind of left that in Bragg's hands, right? And Bragg decided not to pursue or to, sort of tamped down to keep looking at it. And eventually the prosecutors, the special prosecutors, both very noisily resigned. One of them wrote a book. And yes, there was not a tenuous connection. Those cases logically belonged together in one big criminal prosecution. It left the Attorney General of the state of New York, right, Letitia James, to bring the charges as only civil charges. That's what she got the $450 million for. The lying to banks, to inflating the value of assets so that he could get larger loans than he was entitled to, so he could pay lower interest. And he ended up causing damage, Mark, of hundreds of millions of dollars. This idea is $450 million. Where did it come from? That's the advantage that you got. Trump, you got to disgorge the advantage you got by lying, by committing civil fraud. You've got to disgorge it like anybody else. You cause $500 million or $1 billion worth of damage. Guess what? You might have a court come back and say you owe $450 million plus interest. That's all that happened to Trump, but it's civil, Mark. It's not criminal. It could have been criminal along with this Michael Cohen case.
So well put. This is really great. And so there is a stretch here that you can convict Trump for the falsifying business records. That's a misdemeanor, right? For falsifying the business records, but that it might, if he can, if it was to try to do something else that was criminal, then you could make it, then it's a bigger deal. Then it's a felony.
My understanding that to violate the state criminal felony law, you have to have this intent beyond a reasonable doubt and know beyond a reasonable doubt that you're violating state law. So Michael Cohen says, I explained to him that we're going to do this thing. That's why I said to him that we had this discussion back and forth where Trump said to me, do it in cash. He's got the recording. Michael Cohen does. I think it's admissible because you can do that one-party recording in New York. You can't do it in California. Be very careful if you try to do what Michael Cohen did in California. Apparently it's legal in New York. So he recorded Trump. He says, I didn't record Trump because I wanted to get him. The guy would bark out 17 different things to do, and I would listen. I used to make sure I did my little checklist. So that was what it was for, the checklist. And when I said, we're going to pay Stormy this money in a check, he said, no cash, no cash. So why does Trump want to pay him in cash? Michael Cohen's going to say, because I told him you're going to be violating federal and state law. And if you do this, if you believe Michael Cohen, well, there it is. He knew, Trump did, from his lawyer, that he was violating state campaign financing law by doing this false documents in the way. If you don't believe Cohen, and they're going to go after Cohen, right? Hook, line, and sinker, everything he's ever done, all perjury, all the things that are his convictions. And then the prosecutor is going to say takes one to no one, right? Right. People like Trump don't hang out with bishops. They hang out with lowlifes and fixers like Michael Cohen. And that's who you bring to court to tell about it. And by the way, it's corroborated. Trump wrote the checks. And so that's what it's going to be. But it could end in a misdemeanor. I don't think that this case is going to end in a prison sentence. I joked with you about him meeting with Macron at the Rikers Island prison. People like that image. That's not what's really going to happen. One thing is interesting. Someone actually wrote an editorial since I made that joke. What would really happen if he was both incarcerated in state court, in a state prison, and he was elected president? And the opinion writer, who I thought explained it pretty well, would say that he would go to the federal courts and he would say this is a violation of separation of powers. The judiciary of some state is impeding my functioning as the president of the United States. And he would get a writ that at least as long as he was president, he'd be released from jail. So he wouldn't have to meet with Macron or have the nuclear button in his cell at Rikers Island.
That's just really wild. Here's a quick question for you from Phineas. David Katz, how do consumers prosecute? This goes back to the recording being surreptitiously wiretapped or eavesdropped on. How do consumers prosecute businesses for violating California and federal wiretapping and eavesdropping laws?
Well, if he's really serious about bringing a suit, I mean, he should speak to an attorney. Don't take my advice, on the podcast about it. But he should speak with an attorney, and there are remedies if you're recorded by someone. A lot of these recordings, they try to cover themselves. They say we're recording this for training purposes or whatever they say. But you're put on notice that they're going to be recording the call. If you're put on notice that the call is being recorded, you can hang up or say no, I don't want to talk to you with the recording going. But it's the unannounced, right? It's the unannounced recording, the surreptitious recording, he should talk to a lawyer about it.
I wanted to see if there's anything else. People essentially are thinking now that it doesn't matter what happens with Trump's case because it's already been baked into MAGA's view of trying to get him back. I mean, that's certainly true that his base is unshakable. If he's in prison, on his way to prison, being tried on something that could send him to prison, it doesn't matter. But it matters to a lot of other people. And that brings me back to the bond. The bond, which we've talked so much about. I've learned more about bonds than I ever thought I would know. And I'm wondering, calling into question whether there is the liquidity to actually pay for the bond. The prosecutor now saying, hey, I want to see about this bond. And if this bond isn't kosher, I'm going to go after Trump properties and other assets to make sure that the state of New York has the bond secured. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that you asked a real common sense question when this came up. When they posted the bond, you said, well, I mean, there's $175 million that sits in escrow somewhere. No, apparently, no, there is no $175 million sitting in escrow somewhere. If you go to like Chase and you say, I want to see the account for this payday lender who is now in the bond business and now posting the bond for their friend Donald Trump, no, there apparently is not $175 million that's sitting there. There may not be $10 billion that's really sitting there. And they're apparently not a New York corporation, which, you know, you can cooperate between the states. There's all these compacts and so forth, but it's much more difficult to collect on the bond. And the idea is that the minute that Trump loses the appeal, and I can confidently predict he will lose the appeal and owe a very substantial amount of money, that instead of having to chase him and his assets, you just go to the bondholder and you say, okay, turn that $175 million over to me. And if it's not that simple, then I think the court, the trial court or the appeals court will say, no, we're not accepting the bond. We're right back to where we started. Have another bondholder. You have 7 days to come up with somebody else with a bond, and we'll take a look. We'll scrutinize that bond. And if you don't come up with any bond that satisfies the $175 million, then she can go collect. This is Letitia James, the Attorney General. She can go collect, whatever that means. If it means start seizing the rents from his properties, if it means taking physical possession of some of the properties, it seems to me that's rather difficult. And also the optics are bad. Why play into Trump's hands? But figuring out the ways to actually collect that money without, going into, now he owns this stock, right? And supposedly this falling stock of his, this Truth Social, if it still has any value left at the time, that might be something. You can probably put a lien on someone's stock account or something. And that's what she'll do. She'll go collect the money because she is entitled to the money right now. That's the idea. Everybody would appeal. Everybody would delay. Everybody would go, ha, ha, ha. I'm going to keep this appeal going. You go and wait for your money. That's not the law. The law is that we presume the regularity of judgments. We presume that the trial court's judgment is a valid one. And you either pay it right now or you're subject to paying it, or you present the bond that the court demands. And if you don't present it, then you're right back to square one, where your creditor, the judgment holder, can go collect against you and collect against any asset that you have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking to see the quote from Letitia James. Trump's bond is so weak that she's saying she may still go after assets. I mean, you never know how much of this is the kicking the dirt at the umpire, just to try to for that moment. I mean, there is some theater to all of this too, I guess, David. But it's a real possibility in the scenarios that you draw out. If there's no there, then she is entitled, I guess, to go after it.
In terms of John, I'm sorry, Mark. One last thing. Is in terms of people who think, Trump keeps getting away with it, this and that. He does have a $450 million judgment against him for committing fraud. By clear and convincing evidence, he committed frauds. I mean, the people who are going to vote for him think, wow, this really is the guy they want to be the leader of the free world. This really is the guy that they want to give that huge authority back to again. Whatever they thought of him when they voted for him in 2016, they have all this additional information. And so I think that this the famous suburban female voters, the famous swing voters, I think this does have a terrible impression. And even in this case, what an image of him. Here his wife has a newborn at home and he's running around with Stormy Daniels. It's very clear that he was with her at that resort. There's photographs of it. I mean, you really want to vote for such a person if you're, a suburban female voter, if you're a swing voter who has concerns about the economy or maybe the border? Is this really the messenger that you want to bring, whatever message it is? Why not give Biden another chance and vote for the new candidate in 4 years if you want the Republicans to come on? Why vote for this guy? On top of that, I do believe that insurrection case, the one in Washington, D.C. federal court, I believe that one will go to trial. This presidential immunity is not going to bar this case from going forward in the federal court in D.C. I think they're going to hear it in April of this month, later this month. And I think the decision is going to come down in May, the latest in June. And I think that the district judge, Chutkan there, is really ready to go. I think she should issue an order now saying if it's not going to be stopped any further on account of presidential immunity, you all get ready to go. Bring your motions, get your motions ready to go, because I'm not going to give you a lot of time to present them. If she has a status conference, let's say July 1st, and she brings them all in and says, look, this case is going to trial in September, and you get a ruling from a higher court, but I don't want to hear it. This case is going to trial in September. I don't see any reason why it couldn't go to trial in September. Pick a jury that's very fast in federal court. I know this take longer than a normal case, but that could be very fast in federal court. Pare that case down. The special prosecutor should lead with his 3 or 4 best ones. The insurrection and the things leading up to it, the slates, the things that are just raw fraud by Trump. He's the only defendant in the case. Nobody else can get a continuance or have this problem or that problem. Trump will try everything to get a delay. He could be on trial September, October. We really could have a verdict. And it doesn't stop the Department of Justice from going forward. He asked for this delay. The 60-day rule before the election they've said already, they're not going to apply it, and it doesn't apply logically. He asked for all these delays, and he ended up 60 days before trial. That's not on the government. That's on Trump. You delay these things, and this is what happens. You get tried a month or 2 before the election.
Wow. That would be extraordinary for a couple of reasons. Just to have the focus of the nation on J6 again, the events, where the president was, what he said. I mean, I feel as though our memory is so short. We have this voracious appetite for news and these cycles of news that don't even last 24 hours. I think these reminders are important. That's why, I love the document case. That'll never happen because it's such an open and shut case. But the J6 case is of immense significance. And that's really provocative, David. Thank you.
Mark,
look,
to remind swing voters that if you vote this guy in, this is the guy who doesn't plan to leave, okay? If you don't like this guy the next time, he may not leave. He didn't want to leave that time. And now he's put these people in place that make it even harder to oust him, even though he's the loser. He lost in 2020. He's going to lose in 2024, try to vault himself in there, right? You know what he's going to try to do. And if he somehow gets back in there, that he's not going to leave in 2028. Even if the country hates him, even if he does every disastrous thing in the world, he won't want to leave. Why should voters take that chance with our democracy? Can I mention one last thing? I used to be on with Dan Abrams a lot. He's on News Nation. And I'm on with him at 2 o'clock our time today to talk about OJ. Like we talked about OJ and being an OJ commentator back in the day, and that remarkable.
Yeah, Dan Abrams really made his bones on some level, I think, during that period as well on Court TV, as I recall.
Yep, and we're talking at 2 o'clock our time today, Pacific Standard Time.
Oh, that's great. We'll check that out. I mean, remember him, Terry Moran. There were these guys who just came out, and Court TV really made such an impression. Of course, it went away, but it's great that, this world of valuable commentary on the law is one that you've been at the forefront of, and I had forgotten that you were a very high-profile figure in that world of commentary on the O.J. Simpson case at the time. So it's great to be able to kind of relive some of that with you. David, such a pleasure and an honor to have you in the mix, and we'll look forward. We'll check you out on. So it's on News Nation at 2 o'clock Pacific.
And what is that? An hour and a half.
Good stuff. All right.
So
David,
on News Nation, yes. Yeah. Great to be with you. Really a pleasure.
David. See you, David. David Katz, everybody. Yeah, right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wow, he's the best. I'd forgotten that he was so linked to the O.J. Simpson case, as a commentator, a legal commentator. Really great. This is the latest on Trump Media and Technology Group. It's called DJT. Stock not doing well, I guess, huh, Kim? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, not very well at all. Oops, make you big and me little. Whoops, what happened there? No. I can't become little again.
Well, it'll all work out. I thank you for, on the way out, smashing the like button. Hit us with a thumbs up.
With your iron rod.
Let me, if I might, I'm so sorry my voice is so shot. Brutal. I had a couple of big voiceover things I was supposed to do today, and I can't do either one of them because of this. But at least we have had a chance to visit here. I wanted to share with you a couple of... here we go. Again, Rain Love, a big shout out to Rain Love, $10 super sticker. Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And Wes with the $5. Wes is always
Big shout out.
So with us. Love you for being such a supporter for so long. Really do appreciate it. Agolf Twitler says, let's all come to the realization MAGA doesn't care if Trump breaks the law and committed crimes. I mean, there's probably some truth to that. I mean, the MAGA people don't care. They're unshakable. I mean, they're that 30%.
There's always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
I mean, it's religion to them, right? I mean, you're not going to be shaken from your faith based on anything that happens. So there's that.
It was so great to see Jim Avila today and to hear from David Katz and from you playing injured over here with your voice all raggedy.
Oh yeah, thank you. But it's a great visit. I love hanging out and I love learning. And we did a little bit of that today. Kim's after party live show goes down now. And we'll be back tomorrow with a Friday show that is chock full of fun.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Johnson Show. Bye-bye.
Florida, Politics with Michael Schur, and the Culture Blaster. All of that tomorrow. Kim, have a great show. Till tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.